The Munich Security Conference, guided by a wise and visionary leader, who is Ambassador Ischinger, repeatedly has warned the whole world, and not only Europe. Today, his words are a stark reminder of our duty to uphold and defend Europe, definitely. I'm not here, Mr. Ambassador, only as Commissioner responsible for Homeland Security, Migration and Citizenship, but also as a convinced European. I belong to a generation that has never lived a war. I belong to a generation that was given a gift by history to live in a free, democratic, prosperous space. It is the greatest achievement of all times. I wonder whether people of my age really understand what does it mean to live in Europe as we know it today, because our forefathers and fathers, Ambassador was absolutely right, they had lived tragedies and wars, and one day wise people, they gathered around the table, they said, let's create a new Europe. And this new Europe today is at stake. Because all these issues of migration, security, more than the economic crisis, are putting in doubt the basic principles upon which Europe is built. So it is our duty to uphold it. And Ambassador, please move ahead and bring everybody in front of the responsibilities in the next conference in Munich. I will be there to share your thoughts with us. It is a warning from history and the duty of our generations. But today the subject is aviation security. And as I said before, security is on the top of Europeans' concerns. And we have to give very clear and concrete answers and take the necessary measures. Definitely, we live in a volatile and unpredictable times. Our neighborhood is ravaged by violent conflicts spilling over national borders. They cause massive population movements which challenge our social structures. 60 million refugees around the globe remind us to live up to our legal, moral, and political obligations and the fundamental values of our union. Cybercriminality is on the rise. Terrorists are emerging both from within our societies and from our neighborhood. Solidarity between us has become harder to ensure. This year, as we celebrate 60 years of peace, stability and prosperity on the European continent, we cannot take any of these achievements for granted. Globalization and increased mobility bring many opportunities, but also challenges and risks. In all this, security, as I said before, is on the top concerns of our citizens. They are concerned about terrorism and the risks to their security, but equally they do not wish to see their freedoms limited or their mobility impeded. Aviation security lies at the very heart of this. We know that it has always been, as I said before, the crown jewel of every aspiring terrorist. We are therefore confronted with the fundamental question: how to continue to ensure and facilitate travel and mobility within, towards, and outside Europe, while keeping our citizens and our society safe. How to enhance mobility while strengthening security. This is true for aviation security, the sector where many of you operate in. But it's also true for the overall security of our European Union. If the terrorist attacks across the world in the last 2 decades have shown one thing, it is that terrorism knows no borders, not in the air or on land, not in Europe or the United States, not in the Middle East or Asia. So we need a new way of thinking and approaching our security, a new way of managing and better protecting our borders. We hear voices that promote closing borders. But closing borders does not stop the threat. No. We need to manage our borders today in a smart way, in an interoperable and interconnected way, and in a European way, bolstering our external perimeter to keep out the threats, while preserving one of the most cherished aspects of our union, Schengen. The freedom to move, live, work, study across Europe. This has been our goal at the European Union level when we proposed the European Agenda on Security 2 years ago, and when we started creating the building blocks for our security union. A genuine and effective union of member states that recognize that security is a collective issue that needs to be dealt with jointly. We are today much better equipped than we were 2 years ago. I still remember the very beginning, 2.5 years ago, when I took the initiative to propose to the European Parliament and the other institutions to adopt a common European agenda both on security and migration, because before Europe was totally unprepared. Now we have set up new cooperation structures to ensure that at EU level we can provide the best support to the operational actions of the Member States. We have, for example, set up the European Counter-Terrorism Centre in Europol, whose resources we are constantly reinforcing. But the threat remains high and rapidly evolving. New threat partners, new modi operandi. This calls for our constant vigilance, for more strategic anticipation to stay ahead of the threat. We have identified gaps in our information exchange systems. We have made proposals to upgrade existing information systems, such as the Schengen Information System, for example. Adopted new systems when required, such as the European Passengers Name Record Framework, and have made proposals for future systems to fill a gap that was identified, such as ETIAS, the European ESTA, and the Entry-Exit System. Our Member States are now in the process of building their own PNR system after the PNR directive was adopted last year in April. And I can tell you I had gone through very harsh moments, especially in the European Parliament, to convince all political parties that they should support our policy. Because, as I said at the time, and we mentioned it before during the breakfast, they must all understand that the safety of our citizens is also one more fundamental right. As a consequence, by May next year, Europe will have its own PNR framework. It's a great achievement. Air carriers play an essential role in the PNR framework, as it is they who must provide Member States with the key data. All these systems are vital for our aviation security. We want to know who comes in, from where, for which reason, and if there are any security risks. But it's not just about creating more information systems. We also need to make sure that these systems talk to each other, that they are interconnected and connected. Our border guards and police officers should all have the right information at the right time. We want all the border management, migration and security data systems at EU level to be interoperable. And this is what we have been working on for more than a year now. Recently, we proposed to strengthen our centralized agency, EU LISA, where all information systems come together. The idea is that all the systems can be searched at the same time using a European search portal in full compliance with data protection rules. The systems use a shared biometric matching service to enable searches across different databases with biometric data, and also that the systems share a common identity repository with alphanumeric identity date to detect if a person is registered under multiple identities in different databases. Airports are a crucial part of the equation here as they are entry points into the Union. They are key points of control where border guards need to have all the necessary information at their fingertips to make a decision. Is the person in front of me a potential threat to the Union? Does the person in front of me pose an irregular migration risk? Is this person really the person he says he is? Could this person be a returning terrorist foreign fighter? Our stronger, smarter, interoperable information systems will, by 2020, be able to help perform this mission better, faster, and with more reliable information to make the decision. Our systems will facilitate this work without creating a new burden or unnecessary queues. Even with better information systems, however, the threats will not go away. Our airports, our aircraft will always be big targets for terrorist attacks. As controlled and secure as these spaces may be, recent attacks have shown how easy it can be for a terrorist to attack soft targets and mass events. Landside areas are, of course, the most vulnerable. This is where your work comes in, on evaluating threats and assessing vulnerabilities. Your risk assessments for the terminal public areas have to be thorough and forward-looking, taking in all the latest information about developing security threats. They should be based on local knowledge. Brussels cannot do this for you, but they should be updated regularly and reinforced with information for partners in Europe and beyond. And I fully share the point of view of the ambassador before saying that we have to enlarge the circle of cooperation, not limited only within Europe or even with our strong allies. Yes, I agree with you, we have to engage Russia and the others, because this phenomenon of which we are confronted today, it is not European, it's global, and many others. What can do from Brussels to help your work in this area is to create networks of best practice, to guide you, and to connect you to other authorities from across Europe that face similar challenges. To focus on where the major vulnerabilities are, to assess them and steer our discussion towards solutions, practical solutions. To create fora for the exchange of ideas on how best to secure our infrastructure and our citizens against the threats. Earlier this year, in February, we organized an EU workshop on soft targets protection. With Airpol, we brought together public authorities responsible for transport and other public areas to exchange information and best practices to enhance security. A major issue here is the threat from insiders. Airport staff that may suddenly become radicalized. Insiders that may be connected to extremist elements. The Metrojet and Dalo airline incidents are still very fresh in our memories. Potentially radicalized staff represent a major source vulnerability. Our vetting standards for airports and other key staff need to be reviewed at EU level. Awareness on insider threats is also key. On January 1st, 2017, we launched an awareness-raising project with transport and security providers. We want to continue working with industry on this important project in the coming months. Just last week, we had the first meeting with member states' authorities responsible for vetting procedures to explore how the process can be made more effective. This work will be stepped up in the coming months. But the security of air transport does not stand on its own. One thing is crystal clear today. It is no longer an option to work in silos anymore when it comes to security. This is why, at EU level, we have strengthened the legislation against firearms acquisition and trafficking. We updated our criminal justice framework against terrorism and stepped up our fight against terrorist financing. This is also why we are stepping up our anti-radicalization work at all levels. As I said earlier, if we want to increase security and fight terrorism in a more effective way, we can only do this globally and specifically with our strategic partners. Europe is not an island. We are, of course, fully engaged, multilaterally, through the International Civil Aviation Organization. What is ever more critical is, of course, the engagement and the intelligence sharing between partners, not just within the European Union, but also outside. And here, of course, I'm referring primarily to the United States of America, not just on aviation security, but on our collective security overall. The threat from personal electronics to aviation security has been in the news for months. The United States banned laptops from countries in the Middle East. It was widely rumored that Europe was next. That is when we took the initiative to open a frank and open channel of communication with our American partners. On the basis of trust and friendship, with my United States counterpart, Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, we acknowledged that the threat we face is common. The concerns are also common. We agreed on the need to raise the bar of aviation security globally. Secretary Kelly made clear that banning electronics on flights from Europe is still on the table. But through sharing all the information we both had, looking at common measures to mitigate the threat, we arrived to a point where, for now at least, that is not necessary. 2 weeks ago, US authorities announced new enhanced security measures for all commercial flights to the United States. These measures are fully in line with the measures that we have been taking across Europe already. For example, on stepping up the vetting of insiders that I mentioned earlier, on better detection technology, such as computer tomography, which we already have in some airports in Europe, on advanced passengers' information sharing, which we do through PNR. Aviation security is therefore an excellent example where global cooperation on global issues such as security can produce global solutions. Of course, this cooperation does not stop here, and it goes beyond the very tangible issues such as aviation threats. The Internet is increasingly becoming the battleground against terrorism. Threats against our aviation can materialize because of all the propaganda and terrorist manuals people can find easily online. This is one of our top concerns when it comes to fighting terrorism. Through our EU Internet Forum, we have been working for 2 years with big Internet platforms to take down Internet propaganda. Over 30,000 pieces of content have been removed. Here, of course, you will ask, what is 30,000 videos or images compared to all the terrorist material online? And you would be right. It is a drop in the ocean. As for aviation security, also on the Internet, we need to do more. That's why we are now stepping up this work and taking it to a global level. The inter-industry is setting up a global forum against terrorism online based exactly on the model of cooperation and content removal we established in the European Union. Cybersecurity, Ambassador mentioned it before, is another key angle, certainly affecting aviation, but also our economies, our citizens, and our democracies more widely. The last global attack, so-called NotPetya, affected not only banks, hospitals, the transport sector. It affected Chernobyl. Cyber threats are a constant moving target. They have become an instrument of geopolitics. The urgency to act is obvious. We need flexible structures in direct dialogues with industry, both large and small. The aviation sector is a key operator of essential services. It should therefore be bastion of resilience to cyber threats. In September, we will put forward a new cyber security strategy to bolster our defenses. We will review everything about the way we do cyber security today, from research and training to the way our operational agencies coordinate their response between them and with our member states. The European Aviation Safety Agency has also made cybersecurity a priority, and they established a European Centre for Cyber Security in Aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, to address today's security challenges, we need to look at security holistically. We know that our geopolitical context will not change anytime soon. Beyond our relationship, as I said before, with the United States that I mentioned, we need to continue investing in strengthening our security partnership with Turkey, the Middle East, the Western Balkans, and Northern Africa. Aviation is a silver thread connecting all of these elements, not only for the mobility of our citizens, but also for the proliferation of the threat across the globe. This threat is collective, and only collectively we can address it. We cannot and should not reverse the great achievements of globalization, of mobility, of technology, and we should never renounce our freedoms. But we need to navigate this volatile era with a steady compass, resolved to play a role commensurate to Europe's history, with a strong security union protecting our citizens at home and a truly global voice for Europe in the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Strong security union. What are the challenges that you face in that regard of bringing 27 nations together and following the same path?
The answer is very simple. To put together and bring together 27 member nations, it was the big challenge. And I'm going to be frank with you. If we had not been pushed by the occurrences and the tragic events, it would be very difficult to convince member states to open their hearts and their mind and start cooperating. Ambassador Ischinger, in his introductory remarks, he touched this very sensitive point. Unfortunately, the so-called deep nation state still resists on whatever we try to adopt at a more European level. But it's the moment to move forward. Believe me, during the last 2 years, from the very beginning, when, as I said before, we decided to, first of all, to adopt a common European agenda on migration, but also on security, we are confronted with the reaction of the nation state. Information sharing is very important. We have to connect all dots. That's why I mentioned interoperability before. And this is what is our ambition. Security Union will be, and we work very hard during these times, exactly what will give a very clear answer to the need of our citizens for more safety, more security for our nations. But in order to do it, we have to foster and deepen trust between member states. I will be a bit outspoken today. I'm afraid that because of the rise of populism and nationalism, we go back to the recent past of the European history. I'm very much concerned with what's happening, for instance, in the Balkans, when this part of Europe is getting re-Balkanized in the diplomatic and historical term. But I see also this kind of phenomena in Central Europe. I was surprised the other day to listen to a politician from Austria saying that he would love to deploy armed forces on the borders with Italy. I mean, it's out of our imagination. What is Europe? It was said before. It was a decision made by wise leaders in the aftermath of the Second World War our forefathers and our fathers who had lived the tragedy of war, although there was still very fresh in their memories what they had gone through during the 2 world wars, but they had the courage, the determination to create the European Union. And Europe should move forward. And right now, under this pressure, coming back to what I said before, there is only one answer: Europe forward, by completing the European project. I fully agree with what the ambassador has repeatedly said. It's the moment to make a step forward, to adopt a common European defense policy. I remind you that when Europe started 60 years ago, our forefathers started with 2 communities. The East Asia community, coal and steel community, and the European defense community, which was actually proposed at that time by France and was aborted by the French Parliament. But now, defense, security, given this new reality, are pushing us towards one and only one way: to complete the European project politically, because the political integration of Europe was somehow stopped 10 years ago after Lisbon. So the answer to all these challenges is clear. Let's adopt federal-type policies and strategies on issues like security, defense, social issues, migration. They're all issues that all countries are facing as challenges the same. And of course, to weaken the power of the so-called deep state. Because whatever is nationalistic is undermining the dream, the vision, and the European project. And unfortunately, because of the migration and the security crisis, the populist powers have gained ground. They threaten our democracies, they threaten Europe. But it is our duty as a generation to uphold what was inherited to us. So, yes, this is the big challenge, how to convince all these countries, all member states, to stop thinking purely nationally. Yes, we cannot become overnight something like United States of America. Definitely, we have our traditions, our national identity, our history. But we can do more in order to fulfill the dream of the ones who created Europe. And this will be the answer to all these issues. And security is on the top of that, because there we see the reaction, the strong reaction of the so-called nation state. But as we said before, it was said by the ambassador, and we all have repeated it many times, that all these challenges are global, and we have to go even beyond the European borders, engaging and putting on board all global stakeholders. Actually, this is in the core of our strategy right now in the European Union. Yes, we are confronted with many problems, but believe me, on a personal basis, but also as a convinced European, because as a student I still remember my friend fighting in the streets of my hometown for a federalist Europe. And now I see that it is our duty of our generation to maintain what was given to us. It will be difficult, but we are determined to do so with the support and help of everybody. And once again, I would like to praise and commend all these initiatives undertaken by Ambassador Ischinger. I was listening to you some minutes ago, and I don't want to tell you that privately. You are the mirror of the thoughts of our generation. That sent us a very clear message. What is our duty? And this gathering here, let me say some words also on that. It's of great importance. And I would recommend, I would suggest to make it more institutional. To have at least once per year a meeting like this, and invite the next time, Ambassador, also the ones who are not here today, to put everybody in front of the responsibilities. Because, as we said, aviation security is on the top of our security agenda, because it remains one of the main targets and the most vulnerable sectors in our life.